If you ask any competitive Pokemon player what the worst type in the game is, 95% of them are going to give you the same answer: Bug. Not only are Bug-type Pokemon designed to be weaker than their peers, they have the lowest average stats out of any of the types. And in terms of what the typing itself offers, it's just not much. More than that, Bug-type Pokemon themselves are rarely given the spotlight. The single best Bug-type Pokemon of all time is Volcarona, a Pokemon introduced over 15 years ago in Generation 5. Volcarona was also the single best performing Bug-type Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet's Generation 9, while none of the new Bug-type Pokemon introduced ever reached above 1% usage at best. But what if I told you that Scarlet and Violet have seen not just a resurgence for the Bug type, but an entirely new use for the type itself? A new niche that has not just performed well in tournaments, but even won the World Championships. It seems impossible. How could the worst type compete with new threats like Fluttermane, Chien-Pao, and Urshifu? But it's true. But before we can understand how the Bug type became a secret weapon for some of the strongest trainers in the world, we first have to understand just what makes Bug such a terrible type in the first place. Bug-type Pokemon have three main issues. First, as I've already mentioned, is the stats. The Bug type is designed to be the tutorial type during a playthrough of the main game. And as such, many Bug-type Pokemon are designed to evolve early to give you a power boost, then to fall off as you progress through the story. As such, their stats are often not designed with competitive play in mind. Now, of all the issues that Bug types face, I would say that this is the least concerning. While it is true that Bug types tend to be weaker than their peers, it's not a rule that every Bug type has to follow. More troubling are the other two issues. The second being the moves that Bug type Pokemon learn. Now, what moves a Pokemon learns can make or break its success. And if you don't believe me, may I remind you that the Pokemon that learns every move in the game is one of the best competitive Pokemon ever, and its stats are worse than Fletchling's. Have you ever wondered what music bugs listen to? Let's figure it out together with the help of this week's sponsor, Raycon. This is my friend Burmy. Now, Burmy's been on the grind recently because he wants to grow up big and strong, and being a measly Motham just ain't gonna cut it. That's where Raycon comes in. Their awesome bone conduction headphones have been a huge help for both me and Burmy, and have been a total game changer when it comes to working out. Get this, they sit outside of your ears. Can you see this? Hello? They're not inside, they're outside my ears, which means you can focus on your music or your podcast while still being aware of your surroundings. That's pretty important for me when I go on my runs because sometimes things are happening and I'm not paying a lot of attention, and I'm sure it's helpful for Burmy too. The bone conduction headphones send sound through vibrations in your bones, which I think is super cool and unique and allows for an awesome balance of focus and safety. Actually, do bugs have bones? I think they just have like cartilage. Bug experts, please let me know. No matter how intense your training is, your Raycons will be there, with the bone conduction headphones sporting a 13-hour battery life as well as being water and dust proof. The bone conduction headphones are here to help you go for gold. Go to buyraycon.com/WolfeyVGC to get 15% off. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Now, it is true that there are some good bug type attacks. Quiver Dance is the best setup move not exclusive to a legendary Pokemon. Rage Powder is a great support option to protect your more important teammates from harm. And Pollen Puff is a move that can be used both offensively for damage or defensively for healing. But unfortunately, moves don't exist in a vacuum, meaning how good a move actually is depends on the Pokemon using it. And here we see the issue, because all of these powerful moves scale directly with the stats of the Pokemon using them. Quiver Dance boosts 3 of your stats, but after a Quiver Dance, most Bug-type Pokemon are still going to have worse stats than Fluttermane without any boosts. Rage Powder's value is heavily dependent on the bulk of the Pokemon using it. You want to be able to not only redirect attacks, but shrug them off. The 3 best Rage Powder Pokemon are, therefore, all Grass-type Pokemon. And other than Volcarona, the only Bug-type Pokemon that even uses Rage Powder on occasion holds the Focus Sash to supplement its meager bulk. Not to mention, more Grass-type Pokemon learn Rage Powder than Bug types. And it's a Bug-type move, which is also the case for Pollen Puff, a move learnable by 4 Bug types and 14 Grass types. And even if more Bug types did learn Pollen Puff, this is another move that is better the better your stats are. If you want to use it for offense, then you want the user to be strong. And if you want to use it for defense, you want them to be bulky. Given that the majority of Bug types are, well, neither, you can see the problem. Despite the 2 issues we've discussed so far seeming to be major problems, somehow the third one is the biggest obstacle that Bug types face, and that is the Bug typing itself is not good. Here's the problem. Bug only hits 3 types for super effective damage: Grass, Psychic, and Dark. Now, only hitting 3 types for super effective damage isn't great, but it's certainly not the end-all be-all. For example, the Water and Fairy types also only hit 3 types for super effective damage, while Ghost only hits 2, and all of these types are considered to be very good, like some of the best in the game actually. But let's look a little deeper here. When I ask you to think of a Dark type, which Pokemon do you think of? Odds are most of you have been brain rotted by this channel enough to think of Incineroar, who is a Dark type but not one weak to Bug. Okay, what about Grass? If you thought about Amoonguss, or Venusaur, or Jumpluff, or Sinistcha, or Hisuian Lilligant, or Ogerpon Hearthflame, or Whimsicott, guess what? Not one of these competitive staples are weak to Bug either, despite all of them being Grass type. And the reason for this is because while Bug only hits 3 types for super effective damage, a whopping 7 types resist Bug type moves. Compare this to Water and Fairy, who also only hit 3 types for super effective, but are in turn only resisted by 3 types as well. Or Ghost, who has only 1 resistance and 1 immunity. With just under half of the types resisting Bug type moves, it's no wonder that these little guys aren't known for their offensive prowess. Even the most offensive Bug type of Volcarona in Generation 9 would rarely run a Bug type offensive move, often opting for Giga Drain or Terra Blast for better coverage instead. Ooh, it's me, Mr. Bug Month. Bug Month! Welcome back to Bug Month. Are you liking it? Are you happy? You better be, because Bug Month only comes once a year and you better not squander the opportunity. This is the second bug-themed video out of 4. That means that there's 2 left. This is because 2 plus 2 equals 4. Bug Month! We got cool bug facts going up a couple times a week. That's in all social media as well as the community posts tab. And we also have a Bug Month merch, including the green screen is my enemy, but the green screen is also my friend. Hang on, I'm gonna figure this out at some point. I'm gonna figure out how to do this. Also, take a look at this Bug Month tote bag. I like tote bags. Also, this is like, it's nice quality, I'll tell you. Has anyone got this yet? It's actually, the quality is nice. Do you wanna look inside? You wanna look inside the bag? Great, now you looked inside the bag. We got hoodies. I've been wearing it. I gotta be honest, I've been wearing it, and so it's a little bit, it's a little wrinkled because I've been wearing it. How do I make it straight like that? Okay. I like this design a lot, but I also really like the additional design. Hang on. I think this one's my favorite. I gotta be honest. Let me know what you all think. I really like all the designs, but I think this one's my favorite. Also, hello, I'm on the screen again. You can only get this Bug Month merch during Bug Month. After that, it's gone forever. This is a limited time merch drop. So if you want something to remember Bug Month by, I recommend the merch. It is quite comfortable as well. I've already said this. I've been wearing this a lot. Now I'm going to disappear now. Bye-bye, back to the video, back to the video, more bugs. But looking at a type's offensive relationships doesn't give us the whole story. What about defense? Here, things look a little better. Bug is only weak to 3 types, and it also has 3 resistances. A much more balanced distribution than on the offensive side. But there is a problem when we dig a little deeper, because 2 of the 3 types that Bug resists are also resisted by the Grass type. And also, 2 of the 3 weaknesses that Bug has are also shared by Grass. What this translates to is that, in many ways, the Grass type is just the upgrade of the Bug type. Now, Grass as a type does have 2 more weaknesses than Bug, but in exchange for these 2 extra weaknesses, it offers a whole lot. First, the stats of Grass type Pokemon are way better than what most Bug types can offer. Second, the moves that Grass type Pokemon can use are not only better than what most Bug types can do, they often include the good Bug type attacks. Amoonguss and Jumpluff both get Rage Powder and Pollen Puff, whereas the only Bug type Pokemon that gets both these moves is Vivillon. And third, Grass as a type offers a bit more than Bug, not only in the form of better moves and better stats, but also with a whole type-wide benefit. Grass type Pokemon are immune to powder moves, which includes moves like Rage Powder, Sleep Powder, and Spore. Given how commonplace these moves tend to be, and given how good the best Grass types are, most teams want at least 1 Grass type on the squad. And if you've already got the upgrade, why bother with the old model? And that's the reason why, of the 18 types present in the game, a Bug-type Pokemon has only won the World Championships 1 time, with Escavalier back in 2011. But wait, this video is supposed to be about how the Bug-type became a secret weapon in Scarlet and Violet. And didn't I say earlier that it won the World Championships? Yeah, I did. Because while a Bug-type Pokemon didn't win the World Championships in Scarlet and Violet, a Bug-type Pokemon did. Okay kid, let me tell you about a little thing called Terastalization. Terastalization is the new mechanic introduced in Scarlet and Violet. And if you're not familiar with the details, here's what you need to know. It's a once per battle mechanic that lets 1 Pokemon on each team change their type into any other type in the game by putting on a funny hat. Whatever type you turn into gets a damage boost, and that boost is larger if your Pokemon was already that type. Seems easy enough to understand, right? But there's one more component to terastalization that ends up making all the difference in our story today. When a Pokemon terastalizes, it replaces all of its defensive properties with those of its new type. So for example, Terragrass Volcarona now takes neutral damage to rock, but is still weak to flying, as it's now a pure grass type defensively. However, this isn't the case offensively. Volcarona will get a new boost to its grass type moves upon terastalizing, but it won't lose its original boost to fire and bug type moves that it got for being a fire and bug type Pokemon. Okay, but why does this matter for our buggy boys? Remember when we were talking about what makes the bug type bad? We talked about how bad it was offensively, and how defensively it was actually kind of okay? Well, terastalization is a mechanic that lets you keep your original offenses, but replaces your defenses entirely. See where this is going? Okay, but there is a Copperaja inside of the Trick Room here, which is... Didn't I say that grass is just an upgrade compared to bug? Didn't I ask why we would ever use the old model when there's something newer and shinier with bonus features? Well, just like when you're thinking about trading in your old iPhone for a new one, there's something else to consider here too, and that's the cost. In general, grass type Pokemon are better than bug type Pokemon. This is not a hot take, but remember why that was. Because grass type Pokemon have better stats, yes, but when you terastalize, your stats don't change. Okay, because grass type Pokemon have better move pools, also yes. But when you terastalize, your moves don't change either. So then the third reason is because grass type Pokemon do what bug types do, but better. They have most of the same resistances and they resist more types as well. But while the two types are similar, they aren't identical. And as it turns out, when you don't need to worry about your stats or your move pool, the bug typing distilled to its purest form is exactly what some Pokemon need. This will be easier to understand with some examples. So let's take a look at a team that I actually lost to at European Internationals in 2024. This team features not one, but two Terra Bug Pokemon. Let's look at Gastrodon specifically. Now, Gastrodon is a Pokemon that is here for one clear reason. Its ability Storm Drain not only makes it immune to all water-type moves, but it also redirects them away from its partner. In the format at the 2024 European International Championships, there was one water type that stood clearly above the rest. Urshifu Rapid Strike. With Gastrodon on your team, you had an excellent answer to the very powerful move Surging Strikes. But Gastrodon is a water and ground type, meaning that it has an enormous weakness to grass type moves. Many players then want to use a Terra type that resists grass, which is especially important given the prevalence of Rillaboom and its powerful wood hammers. Now, the most obvious Terra type for Gastrodon is Fire, to resist grass and to take advantage of the fact that you're immune to water moves, canceling out one of the weaknesses of fire types. But Terra Fire Gastrodon has a problem, Urshifu. Because while Gastrodon ignores its water moves, Urshifu is also a fighting type that can do huge damage with close combat. But at the same time, if you don't respect Rillaboom, your slug won't be able to stick around for very long. And as you're probably realizing right now, if you want a type that resists both fighting and grass, there is only one option, and that's Bug. At the same tournament, another Pokemon made use of Terra Bug that made it all the way to the top 16. Heatran. Heatran is a Pokemon with only 3 weaknesses, to fighting, ground, and water. Typically, Heatran would run Terra Grass. It resists the ground and water type moves that you're weak to, and you don't mind the fire weakness because of Heatran's Flash Fire ability. However, this specific Heatran used Terra Bug, and I suspect the reason why is because this team is loaded up with Pokemon that beat Urshifu Rapid Strike. Booster Energy Iron Bundle and Choice Scarf Galarian Zapdos outspeed and KO even Choice Scarf Urshifu before it can move, and Landorus and Ogerpon outspeed and KO the other variants. With so much hate for the best water type in the format, the resistance to fighting was likely more valuable than the resistance to water would have been. So one use for Terra Bug for competitive players was the unique resistances that it provides, using the fighting resistance that grass lacks to cover specific sections of the metagame that other types can't handle. But there's actually another reason to use Terra Bug, and it has to do with what it doesn't give you. It's time to talk about the Terra Bug Pokemon that won the World Championships. A new Pokemon introduced in Scarlet and Violet, Iron Hands. Now, going into the 2024 World Championships, there was a clear, established, best Terra type on Iron Hands, and that was Terra Grass. Not only does it turn your ground weakness into a resistance, but it also gives you an immunity to the pesky powder moves of Amoonguss, who resists both your fighting and electric type attacks. You would expect this to be the Terra type chosen by Luca Ceribelli, the 2024 Pokemon World Champion, especially because rather than using a coverage move like Heavy Slam or Ice Punch, which can do good damage to Amoonguss, he chose to run 2 different fighting type moves in Low Kick and Drain Punch in addition to Wild Charge and Fake Out. meaning there was nothing this Iron Hands could do against Amoonguss. But if you expected Terra Grass, you would be wrong, because Luca decided to go with Terra Bug. Why? Well, part of the answer is because of the resistances that Bug provides, offering not only a ground resistance, but also a fighting resistance as well. And that was important for Luca's matchup against Zamazenta teams. However, this alone doesn't justify the Terra type when you consider how difficult Amoonguss is for this Iron Hands. But it's not like Luca was using a Bug type move, so what extra benefit could he be getting? It's a trick question. The answer isn't in some extra benefit, but in a cost that he doesn't have to pay. Bug-type Pokemon share many weaknesses with Grass-type Pokemon, but they don't share all of them. And one crucial difference between the two types is Ice. While Grass-type Pokemon are weak against Ice, Bug-type Pokemon are neutral to them. For Luca, this meant that he could Terastalize Iron Hands against the combination of both Calyrex Ice Rider, the strongest Ice-type Pokemon ever made, and Ursaluna, one of the strongest ground types. Terra Bug gives him a resistance to the ground-type moves from the pair without ending up weak to any of their attacks, and allowing him to launch a devastating Low Kick or Drain Punch in return. There is no other type in the game that can do this, because the other two types that resist ground, which are Grass and Flying, are both weak to Ice. I have one more example for you, and for me it's a bit of a personal one. In 2025, I won the European International Championships, which at the time I'm recording this is the single largest official live Pokemon tournament thus far, by number of entrants. As a reward for winning this tournament, the Pokemon Company distributed to the games of people around the world one of the Pokemon on my winning team, as a mystery gift that anyone could download and use. The Pokemon the company decided to distribute was my Incineroar, which is very funny, but do you remember its Terra type? That's right, it was Bug. My most famous Pokemon, the Pokemon I use that is currently owned by the most people, has a Terra type of Bug. On this team, I needed to Terastalize Incineroar against one main type, Fighting. And that's because I needed to Terastalize Incineroar against one main Pokemon, Zamazenta. So at first, I considered Terra Ghost. Because Ghost-type Pokemon are fully immune to fighting moves, this seemed like the best option. However, I ran into a problem. Zamazenta was often paired with Chien-Pao, a Dark-type Pokemon. Smart opponents could use both Body Press and a Dark-type move like Throat Chop on the same turn, both into Incineroar, and threaten to hit it super effectively regardless of whether or not I Terastalized. I then considered Terra Flying, but the problem remained. Now the Chien-Pao could go for Icicle Crash to cover the Terra regardless. Flying was extra appealing because my team's Groudon matchup was, well, not very good given that I didn't have a single ground resist. Things were looking kind of bad until I considered Terra Bug and Incineroar tying it all together. I could use it against Zamazenta even next to Chien-Pao, and I could also use it as a panic button against Groudon too, because of the resistances that Bug gave me and the weaknesses that it didn't. When Scarlet and Violet first began, I made a video ranking every single Terra type in the game, and there I put Bug third from the bottom, at 16th out of 18th. I am both surprised and pleased to say that I was wrong. And while it's certainly not a Terra type considered top tier by the field, it has proven to be an effective secret weapon when used on the right Pokemon. I know that these Terra Bug Pokemon winning isn't the same as an actual Bug type winning, but I can't help but feel happy for the worst type in the game regardless. And who knows? Maybe Game Freak will look at the success that Terra Bug had in Generation 9 and use it as inspiration to make an actual good Bug type again in Generation 10. Or maybe they'll just use it as inspiration to make a Bug type regional variant of Incineroar. Only time will tell. Thank you for watching the latest installment of Bug Month. You can check out the last installment in Bug Month, which is what is the worst Bug type Pokemon.